Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So as we've been talking about, I look at how crazy the Republican Party has gone, and really, how I would argue how far we've gone as a society. And here to help maybe explain some of how we got where we are, how we ended up with Donald Trump in the White House, and well, maybe where we're going to go, or hey, how we fix it. I've asked Amanda Marcotte to come talk with us. She's a writer over at Salon. Also has written a new book, Troll Nation. Amanda, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, I get this question all the time. How did we end up with the Marmalade Mussolini in the White House? How did we get to this point? You've got an answer.
Yeah, so my book basically argues that the American right has lost a lot of the cultural arguments. They've lost the argument on economics. They've lost the argument on gender and family and traditional family values. And all they have left now is rage and a desire to troll the left. And so they nominated Donald Trump to be their nominee for president, not because of any offer, but because he was the best troll, the best candidate for just angering the left.
Yeah. No, I can't tell you how many times I heard people say, well, I voted for him because we need to shake things up, or if everything's going to go down in flames, he's going to make it happen faster. There are a whole bunch of reasons outside of he's actually going to make things better.
Yeah, and it's that sort of nihilism that I find so fascinating and made me want to really write a whole book about it. And when I did, I started to really kind of dig into the way that right-wing media and culture generally has been, fostering this attitude for decades now. If you turn on Fox News or Rush Limbaugh or go to Breitbart, all you ever see nowadays is this sort of hateful, vicious vindictiveness on the right.
I talked about at the beginning of the program, I consider him a friend. He was a good guy. He was someone who, while I was away, helped my wife out a couple of times, but a rabid right-wing Fox viewer, listened to, morning to night, all of the right-wing blather and internalized it because it's all he heard. And I look at him and how it was all about, those people. They're getting something that I'm not getting and I'm paying for it. And it was this kind of divide and conquer that the right really, honestly and truthfully, masterfully, stuck into his ears 24/7.
Yeah, and today, as we're recording this, the New York Times has a piece up. Another study has come out that I think really gets to this, where they found that despite all the claims otherwise, it was not economic insecurity that drove the Trump election, but it was the sense of a lot of white Christian conservatives that they have lost the culture war and they're just angry and resentful and want to lash out. And I think that it's nice to be backed up by science, but I will point out that my book was written long before that study came out.
So, it is the race then. Because I was saying, look, this was a natural, honestly, this was a natural reaction to the black guy in the White House for 8 years.
Yeah, I think we can't underestimate that. I write about this a lot in the book, but it's important to remember that Donald Trump really became a political figure when he became the number one birther, right? He had tried to get into politics multiple times before. He ran for office, I think, twice before, and it never went anywhere. But then when he started going on TV and claiming that Barack Obama was not born in the United States, all of a sudden he became a right-wing darling. And that basically boosted him into the presidential nomination. And I think that's relevant because birtherism is just a racist conspiracy theory that is meant to sort of not just troll Barack Obama and everyone who voted for him, but any black American that thinks they should be treated as equal in this country. It's basically giving them the finger.
Yeah, and they for all those years they did that, and it's interesting that someone would vote for this guy. I'm still struggling with the reality of, I get it as kind of a goof, but to actually want to run the country, or as he's been doing, kind of running things into the ground, it's really just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the destructiveness, I think, comes from, it's a temper tantrum, right? If they can't win, then they will make sure that if they can't win the fight, then they're going to make sure that there's nothing left to win, right? if liberals are going to prevail in sort of the arguments about what this country is, what it means, what our values are, they're going to destroy this country rather than let us have it. It's really that ugly, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. That scorched earth mentality. But you brought up the evangelical Christians, who, you know, I always thought were kind of the moral compass of the country, and, you know, they live by the Ten Commandments and all that stuff. And yet, I look at the person that they're backing, who seems to have broken all of them, and yet overwhelmingly they still support him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really has pulled the wool off a lot of our eyes. I mean, I was a little more skeptical, I think, of evangelical Christians than you, but even I think, was shocked at how willing they were willing to go with him. And I think what it proves is that white evangelical Christianity has never really been about morals or values. It's always been a white national identity politics, right?
I've always said it's a cult, but, you know,
yeah.
Yours is just as good.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think, you know, their notion from family values is really not about family values. It's not about the sanctity of marriage or anything like that, but just sort of this male domination of women. And while Donald Trump has no family values, he definitely agrees with them on male domination of women.
Yeah, good point. So let me bring this back to the media, because, you know, we're in this day and age. It's always been my statement that you can travel across this country and right-wing blather is everywhere. This pro-corporate message, this anti-worker, anti-government message is always in your ear, and we've almost trained a generation to create what I would say, you know, Trump is the shock jock, talk radio president. We've created him, and it's been you know 40 years in the making. But because of this training, you know, we now have what people seem to have wanted, which is, again, kind of scary to me.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's one of those, you know, unknowable questions of chicken and egg. Like, did talk radio create this attitude, or did it sort of fuel it? How did it go? My thought is, I think their audiences do feel this sense of loss of the culture and of control and of domination, right? But talk radio gives them somebody to blame, liberals. And I would say that I think we would be, it's important to remember how much value and importance propaganda has, especially in sort of breeding this kind of hatred. I mean, we've seen this in other societies. We've seen it in, you know, the Rwandan genocide, for instance, was fueled by a lot of radio broadcasts. So, you know, I really don't think we should underestimate how dangerous that kind of nonstop propaganda can be.
Right, and the coordination that's behind it. Because look, you know, I know a lot of people who are on the right, who do this job, and the resources that they get from one think tank after another. You look at the entire State Policy Network, that creates their alternative facts and alternative narratives, and basically hands them not just their argument, but the counter arguments and talking points. It's really, you got to give the right credit. They have done a masterful job in creating a propaganda network that I think even Goebbels would go, wow, nice job.
Yeah, and I agree. And I also want to emphasize, though, that their audiences choose this. I mean, we cannot underestimate that. You know, time and time again, studies show that liberal audiences enjoy taking in liberal media of the kind that you and I both create, right? I work for Salon, you have your radio show, but they also read the New York Times and the Washington Post and listen to NPR. So liberals are more likely to have a diverse media diet, whereas conservatives tend to stick only to propaganda.
No, I'm with you, but you know, I would argue that there isn't really a choice out there. I listen to conservative talk radio all the time because it's the only thing that's on the dial in our area.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And it's, I think, something that's a lot underestimated, because a lot of people on the left do not listen to the radio for long periods of time.
And the other part of it is I do want to know what the other side is saying. I want to know what their arguments are, which, you know, I guess the right, a lot of my friends on the right don't. They're in their pool. They stay their lane. So, you know, in looking at Troll Nation, the book that you've written, you know, was there anything in your research, in your time, that surprised you, that you go, wow, I didn't think of this? Or was this just something that was just very predictable and very, it just flowed out?
I think I've been surprised a lot over the past 2 years to the point where I'm a little numb. But the one thing that does kind of stick out to me was some research that shows, and it was when I interviewed Dan Kahan from Yale about what it means for people to say they believe something, right? And what he said is that and I quote the studies in the book, there's studies that find that when somebody is asked if they believe Barack Obama was born in the United States, whether they say yes or not really depends a lot on how you frame the question. So if you are quizzing them about if they think the point of the quiz is that they're just being tested on how well they know facts about U.S. politics, they'll say he was born in Hawaii. But if they think it's like a politicized environment or that it's trying to gauge their political views, conservatives will say he was born in Kenya. So what I think I learned from that is that a lot of these conspiracy theories and crazy beliefs that conservatives has, they don't believe them. It's a tribal thing. It's about showing their identity and their political views and trolling liberals, essentially.
Are we in second grade? I mean, didn't peer pressure go away when you were I guess maybe out of high school?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I think that there's a lot of anger on that side, and I think it justifies in their mind, childish behavior like that.
Yeah, and speaking of childish behavior, what I started with at the beginning of the program, because during our radio show, when we had you on, I had a bunch of people asking questions and reminding me of things, and someone had reminded me of the 2004 election with John Kerry and the people running around with Purple Heart Band-Aids.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And I go, again, these are people who pro-military, they're, at least they claim to be, until they're not. And it's just this weird dynamic that you could take someone like Kerry, who was a war hero, was awarded multiple medals and I think 3 Purple Hearts, and they're running around with Band-Aids, demeaning basically everything they claim they stand for.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now I wish I'd put that in the book, because the whole purpose of that was just to be mean, right? I don't think a lot of conservatives actually believed the lies about his service. Or that he didn't actually earn his Purple Hearts. I'm sure they know that there's actually a rigorous research behind who gets a Purple Heart and who doesn't. They just wanted to be mean.
Do you think the average person knows that it's a rigorous process?
No, but I think a lot of the people that had military experience that were running around with those purple Band-Aids do. I think a lot of them were vets, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let me ask you kind of last line of questioning, because, we've kind of talked about, where we are. We kind of talked a little bit about how we got here. Where do we go? I mean, at the end of this, I don't know that as a country we can continue to be ripping each other apart and shouting platitudes past one another. At some point, we have to be able to talk to each other. And I know the internet gives us this ability to, in an almost anonymous way of, saying some of the most vile, hateful, hurtful things. Is there a way forward? Is there a way for us to, to come back to some bit of reality? Because look, I guess I'm a little bit older. I remember when there were some facts that we all agreed on. There were some commonalities between all of us. It seems now the alligator jaws are just getting wider and wider until eventually they snap on our behind and cause real damage.
Yeah, no, I mean, the sad and scary thing is that there's not necessarily a point. There isn't necessarily anything we can do to sort of make conservatives behave better, right? I really wish that there was, but unfortunately history shows unfortunately, these kinds of ugly nihilistic movements spiral completely out of control. I mean, how many governments have risen into like actual fascism over time? So I want to really emphasize that the danger here is not minor and that people should not underestimate it. As for what the left can do, my advice in the book, and just generally I repeat it over and over, is we should spend less time worrying about trying to get conservatives to listen to us, because they are autonomous people. They're going to do what they want and they're going to think what they want, and we can't make them not do that.
Right.
But what we can do is we can organize better. We can get our side to really get out in the streets and get into the voting booths and open their wallets and knock on doors. And I think that can be very effective.
So you're basically saying, the people on the far right, they're fives, let them go. You're never going to move them to sanity.
Yeah, and if they come to sanity, it's going to be their own choice, a reaction to something in their lives or in the political environment. It's not going to be, you can't argue people into reason. I mean, there's a saying that you can't reason people out of a position they didn't reason themselves into, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So basically, we're going to be a polar society for some time, and my fear in that kind of a world is that we become almost a banana republic, where ideologically we swing from one extreme to the other, and we kind of lose the middle of the road.
I share your fear a lot. One thing that gives me hope is I don't see any evidence that the Democrats are becoming anything like a mirror image of the Republicans. They seem to be, by and large, still a party whose leadership is not corrupt, is not doing weird ideological nonsense, is not pandering, that they're still oriented around policy and still good governance.
Well, the hope is that maintains, and we move somewhere back this November towards righting the ship, and in 2020 maybe taking us back to somewhere near. I don't even want to be north of the sane line, just somewhere near it would be okay with me for now. But Amanda, great book. I appreciate you taking some time for us. I hope it does really well.
Thank you so much.
Good stuff, Amanda Marcotte. Again, you can pick up her book. Amazon has it. It's all over the place. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can check out Troll Nation. Highly, highly suggested. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.